Final, the podcast covering all the things you never knew about VFX. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 11 and part 2 of our VFX as a business. So in the previous episode, we covered things like who is the VFX team, say client side, what's done kind of on set and how that's coordinated and things like that. And we covered budgeting and bidding. So for this episode, we're going to now talk about VFX vendors. So we're now kind of transitioning from when things are done on set to now when they are now being done at facilities and things. So we'll be talking about VFX vendors and the post-production kind of process. But first, I'm going to hand it over to my lovely co-host. Helen, how are you doing?
I am good. I am, once again, super ready to talk about VFX as a business. I do keep saying, like, this is actually something that I'm really passionate about, which is super lame because really it's just like spreadsheets and organizing things. but that's my jam.
Which is fine because this is where I'm just like, I hate this part. Like, this is why we're a great team. So one of the things we're first going to talk about is VFX vendors. And vendors is kind of like an industry term. It's basically kind of like, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, like companies. So you'll have your big name brands like your ILMs, your MPC, Framestore, DNEG, Weta. Yes, can't forget Weta and things like that. But then sometimes you could also have smaller studios, and there's the wonderful of picking a vendor. And we're going to kind of deep dive into that now.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about VFX vendors is from the outside, you can look at them all and go, oh, they're all these enormous companies, they all do the same thing, blah, 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 blah. But you do find that certain companies do specialize in certain things. You might find that, and this can also change sort of year to year as well. And often it depends on sort of who is employed at that company at the time, like maybe who their creative directors or their, operational officers, like all those people high up, what they are doing often affects what your company is good at. So you might have a company that at one point does water very well or does creature work very well. And then sometimes you get these smaller companies like Lola who do de-aging very well.
Yes.
Or digidoubles very well. So what you can do is you can say, okay, well, I'm going to have this enormous movie that is entirely based on the top of the ocean. I'm going to need some incredible VFX water. Who's excelling at water right now? And you can, go to them and say, hey, you're our first pick. How much will you do this for? Or you might say, it's a general action movie. There's a little bit of everything in there. Let's just put it out and say, hey, we're going to be making this movie and see what people say. Like some people might be like, hey, we don't have space for this right now, or we can do this for you, but it's going to be real expensive because we're pretty good. Or, you might be getting maybe a new company who's trying to like undercut those other guys, and they'll be like, well, we'll do it for super cheap. And then you have to sort of look at them all and work out like, okay, well, they're going to go really cheap, which would be great for my budget, but are they actually any good?
Yeah.
And you have to sit there, and this is why big companies have showreels. So this is something that Shannon is like super, super into because this is her jam. So I'm going to let her talk all about this.
Yes, this is, it's funny because, this is kind of, definitely was my jam for at least 3 years. And it's kind of will be basically, I worked in coordination, or someone will work in coordination with a new business team. And what will happen is things are kind of set in what I would call pitch reels. It can be called show reels as well, but they can happen a couple different ways. You can have it to where, at least when I did it, they would say, hey, we have a pitch, and it'd be like a code name usually. And they would say, so we need like, say, old school London. We need to see like 18th century London. Here is our shows, or I would make it my business to know what shows had kind of making buildings look old or taking out, like what we had mentioned in our previous episode, modern elements or things. And you make a reel to kind of show this is the stuff we've done in the past. And so here's our, I didn't even know what we called it, but basically making things look old timely. I myself personally would also choose a track, like a music track that's kind of gives the look and vibe of the project as well. So like if it's supposed to be kind of, a suspense thriller, would use more of a kind of different track than say if it's an uplifting animal film. So that was something that me personally, I'm not saying that every editor does this, but I would do, because you want to get that look and feel of the show, because you're ultimately trying to win that job. You are trying to win that work for people. So for me, I would be like, okay, this needs to grab them. Because also if you use a slight side note, if you use a track that people know or that's well known, you run the risk of either taking them out of it or them going, oh God, I hate this track, and they turn the reel off and you've lost the work. I know that sounds petty, but it's genuinely something you have to think about.
Yeah, and that's even something that, like, advice that we give to artists when they're putting their reels together for them, like, pitching themselves to companies like Hire Me. We always go, like, if you're going to pick music, go for something like unobtrusive, or just like don't go for your heaviest dubstep, because if someone turns that on and they've got their speakers on and they're they're in their office, you could get them to just go delete.
Well, because the other thing is too, you have to let the work show. So yeah, you could have a great edited reel to dubstep, but then you're not letting the work speak for itself. So as again, this is for me personally, but as an editor, it was like, okay, this is not about me, the editor. This is about the company and the work and having those shots breathe and things like that. Something else that could happen, forgive me, Helen, if I'm transitioning here. Sometimes also another thing will happen in like new business is sometimes a project is out there in the stratosphere and they're not quite sure who they want to go with. So they kind of go to kind of all the big boys and girls and go, okay, this is the project. This is what we're looking for. Go. And sometimes it's like a development project, and so you're setting up things. So be it it could be creatures walking in a scene, or it can be. I think usually the ones I dealt with, the development projects, it was dealing with creatures or not creatures, but like characters or things, because it's developing the look development and things, and that's almost sometimes treated as like its own kind of show and things. Maybe not, but what in terms of reels and things, it's not now, okay, here's the best from, Spider-Man, and this is the best from, Wonder Woman or whatever. It's kind of its own made thing. It's its own assets and things. So kind of bidding for work can happen those one of two ways.
Yeah, and also even if you don't have a specifically made show reel from a company, like someone going, I really want this work, this is why you see companies on YouTube with this is MPC's FX reel, this is ILM's creature reel, this is Framestore's whatever reel. Like they will put those out so that they can have a broad, hey, for people who aren't going to be contacting us asking for us to give them the world first, here's what we can do, and this is the best of what we've done in the past couple of years. So it's always really useful information for people.
Yes, and sadly sometimes something looked over that isn't always taken into account, but yes, it's very important.
Yeah. And also, those showreels can sometimes tell an artist, is there somewhere that I want to work? Because if you get someone who, they really want to work on big creatures and monsters and stuff, but that company's showreel is all just like, cars
and spaceships, and
then they're just going to be like, okay, maybe I don't want to work there, because they're going to tell me, you don't get to model tigers, you get to model a truck.
Yeah. And that's important. I feel that that's one of those things. And again, that's something I at least personally would take on board, where it's like, I think personally a company should know too, because that's what they're promoting. This is because you want that best talent. You want that passion. You want those people that are like, I want to work on quadrupeds, AKA, animals or creatures that walk on four legs, or, if you have a digidouble, then you go, I love modeling famous people, and that's what I want to do. And so it all works out for everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the filmmakers can actually pick a VFX vendor fairly early in the process, or they can say, here's some of the work. We're not sure who we're going to go with for this last big action scene. So we're going to hold this back and then talk to a couple of different people. This is also how the VFX producers get the most bang for their buck. You don't want to be going to a very expensive studio just because they're doing the rest of your work to do little graphical inserts, or, you need like a picture on an iPad. You don't necessarily want to spend, giant studio level money for something that, say, a small boutique company could do for a fraction of the cost.
Yes.
And also at the same time, you might want to go to those boutique companies like Lola. And I can't believe I'm calling Lola a boutique company, but in the grand scheme of things, they kind of are. You don't want to be going to a big expensive company and going, we're going to give you a load of money for a de-aging that might not work. You might want to go, let's just go straight to Lola, see if they've got the space for it. I want to have, I don't know, baby Hugh Laurie. I want them to do it.
Yeah.
So you have your preferred vendors that you would go to for different things.
Yes, absolutely.
And in case I hadn't mentioned it, Lola are the company who de-aged Robert Downey Jr. in Captain America Civil War. They've done an awful lot of really impressive stuff that's kind of hard to tell that's what they did.
Yeah, well, Captain Marvel, that was a big one because, for the Robert Downey Jr., that was a scene. That was one scene. Whereas Captain...
a very, very close up.
Yeah.
Every movement of his face where you're like, you sure you didn't record this 25 years ago?
Yeah. But then, for Captain Marvel, you're now dealing with every shot that he was in.
Which you very
almost
rarely
took
see.
it to a grander scale. And I feel personally that kind of put Lola just on the map. I mean, heck, Samuel L. Jackson named him by name in one interview where he was like, oh, so...
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, which I thought was cool because he knew who the vendors were. And two, it just gives up much promotion because I remember them asking oh, so who did your makeup? Oh, a place called Lola. I was like, yes. This is also, it's funny, and this is also why when you sit through those Marvel credits, because we all do it, because we're waiting for that end of the film scene, you see at least 6 or 7 visual effect companies. It's because of what Helen has just described, where it's oh, you need some screen replacements? That will go to such and such. Oh, you need Ultron? That will go to such and such. And yeah. And even title sequences now. There are separate companies that do opening and closing credits.
Yeah, and
that's
they do some cool stuff as well.
Oh my God, yeah, they're amazing. And I love that nowadays you're seeing it's even credited different. It'll say opening titles by or closing credits by blah, blah, blah.
So
blah,
good.
Blah. And it's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And it also, I did it again. And it also is a way to get things made faster too, because if you separate it out, I mean, obviously I can imagine from a coordinating standpoint, it's a nightmare, but by deviating or delegating the work out to different companies, you also get things done faster. So that's how you're getting a 6-month, 7-month visual effect turnaround, not a 2-year turnaround, by going multi-vendor instead of sole vendor. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because you could have 2 companies, each with 500 people to work on a show. You're very rarely going to have 1,000 people in one company to work on the same thing. So if you split it out, you've got all their editors, you've got for both companies, you've got all their coordinators for both companies, you've got all those artists for both companies. You've got a good way to split it out. So yeah. So the way that the VFX companies actually communicate with the filmmakers is through that VFX team. And you will always have somebody from the filmmaker side in contact. Like I say, often it's a coordinator. But, sometimes where you can have producers who are really involved in this sort of thing as well. So you can have a variety of different people. Sometimes they have a production manager level on the client side, and maybe they're the ones who are dealing with the different vendors. Say you've got 6 or 7 vendors and you need to be keeping them all in line. You need to be seeing what they all need to be doing. You need to make sure that they're all producing the amount of work that you want. So you need to have that person who's able to communicate with them all. from the very beginning, you need a way to track all of this. And even now, people are still using a program called FileMaker Pro, which I personally have so much hatred for because you can't undo things in FileMaker Pro. And it's so frustrating. But this is a sort of, I don't know, old school way of keeping track of everything.
Yeah.
You have a database of all of your shots, all the different takes, the plates that you've sent out to different vendors, the requests that you've made, how many you've sent, how many you've had back. All that information is kept in one place. And recently, there's been sort of a move in the industry for the actual filmmakers, the client side team, to be using Shotgun, which is a production management tool that that Autodesk actually owns. So they're the same people who make Maya and 3ds Max and a lot of tools that the artists are using day to day. I think they've only bought them relatively recently. But often you will have that tracking being done within Shotgun, which means that if a vendor is also using Shotgun, they're able to go back and forth a bit more easily. Or they'll want exports in a specific way so that they can import them back into Shotgun. And that's why a lot of universities, at least in the UK, have actually started teaching Shotgun to people like as part of their courses.
Oh, wow.
Because sometimes it's really useful to have someone who's, used proper production management software that isn't, MS Project.
Yeah.
Or Excel.
That's actually quite fascinating because I didn't start using Shotgun. I mean, I used Shotgun briefly when I was in commercials, because the other fascinating thing about Shotgun, unlike FileMaker Pro, is you can tailor make it to your facility. So there were ways that I don't even know how the back end even works, but especially at some facilities where, like, say from an editorial standpoint, they send me a playlist and then they're like, oh, we need these shots cut in to review. Boom, 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 hit a few commands, and all of a sudden it's now there in a completely different software. It must be something similar, kind of like to XMLs and things, but I don't know. It's quite interesting. So that Shotgun is from what I can tell, can be tailor made. I don't know if it's open source, but yeah, it definitely seems like you need some wizards to get it to work. But yeah, it's quite fascinating that it also can change what it's needed, so it's adaptable basically. And yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different tools that people can use, as well as Shotgun. Like, one of their big competitors is F-Track, which a couple of companies use. So Shotgun isn't actually open source, but it is definitely customizable. And I know that a lot of companies actually tend to have teams of people who will work on, updating it, making sure it's all integrated with their tools and blah, blah, blah. But there are alternatives. So there is F-Track, which is, again, just another production management tool out there. Like I say, you can just use MS Project. You can just use Excel. There isn't actually anything stopping you from running a whole show out of Excel if you want to. I have done that before when I was in my indie movie days. So, as long as you know what it is that you need to track, there's different ways that you can do it. But yeah, Shotgun's just interesting that the client sides have started picking this up as well as a tool to use. One of the things that can be generated by these tools that the filmmakers will use, like FileMaker and like Shotgun, is the data sheets and the count sheets that need to be sent over to the VFX facilities. So I'm going to let Shannon just go wild on this one. Well, no, it's interesting because usually when things are coming to a facility, it's called turnover or TO or whatever. We get a lot of packages through the IO or studio or whatever data lab. There's various names for this kind of area, but a lot of those things that come along, say with like the scans and things, are data sheets and count sheets. Helen might have to help me a little bit more with the data sheets, but I mean, it's going to be kind of information sometimes of, hey, this is what's in the package. This is what it is. And then count sheets especially are basically a sheet that has, for a take, the kind of the cut range, the comp range, how many handles, what all the lens information. Sometimes like if the scan needs to be flipped and flopped, all sorts of stuff. So basically it's kind of, especially from an editorial standpoint, kind of our first communication from what's been happening on set. And then we do various things to kind of get that information ready in Shotgun or any other kind of tracking software. So that way production knows, the artists know it. That's when we start getting to all the different cogs in the machine on the vendor side to get communication running smoothly.
Exactly. The data sheets, it's sort of the same thing as count sheets. Depending on who it is who's sending it over. Quite often it's the same thing. But this is obviously all those things that artists need. What the cameras are, like which lens grid to match it with, if they're doing match move, all.
LUTs.
LUTs.
They also LUTs. That's a big one I've been dealing with recently. So yes, LUTs, color information.
There's lots of extra information on there there's often lists of witness camera takes that you can refer to as well. So there's a whole bunch of information that gets sent over, because if you get given just a quick time or a series of frames, you don't necessarily know exactly what it is that you need to be doing with it. Quite often these can have briefs on them. They can have, VFX assumptions, like we're going to be doing this with a matte painting as background instead of a full environment extension. And it just gives you a little bit more information about what's going on.
So kind of as mentioned earlier with the count sheets and data sheets, this is what kind of comes with something called turnover. And turnover, sometimes it's basically like a package of data and shots and things. From my limited experience, that sometimes comes through from an additional vendor or like what would you call them, Helen? Like a processing house?
So there's a couple of different companies that this could be. Sometimes it goes through the DI or the digital intermediary, but sometimes it is just a company that processes the material, because the raw footage is in a data format that no one can read. So that needs to be processed into images, and each of those still images can be, the magic of cinema. Many still images become one large moving movie. So they are processing that raw data that is just, how the sensor has responded to light, and just making that into actual scans. And obviously they're called scans because back in the day they used to be actual film that was used, so they would have to actually scan in those frames. But we still call them scans. Sometimes we call them plates. But those are what the processing guys will be putting together and sending over to the VFX vendors.
And also this is kind of where, and say if you're using like a red camera, that you will change that take from the raw metadata name to what your show take and name will be. So, for example, this obviously every show is different, but then you'll get kind of say if you're working with episodic, you'll get, okay, this is, the show code, the episode, the sequence, the shot, and it's all broken down in a series of numbers and letters and things. Same goes for film. I think it can be, scene, sequence, or things like that. But so I guess that's where that also happens, is in that process of the facilities. Okay.
Yeah, because that's all part of tracking it, right? You can't say, I don't know, we've got 300 shots with this vendor. They're for that scene. I don't know what they are. You need to be able to say, okay, well, we've got 30 shots from this scene. They are shots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 50 shots in this other scene. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So, you're able to have that information.
And this information is usually decided, at least the naming conventions and things, when a show has been awarded. And it's kind of, again, a way of communicating. Sometimes I'm learning that this can change during the show, but they'll usually have kind of a spec sheet. So you can also go back to and go, yep, it's this resolution. This is the frame rate. This is how you're going to name it. This is how we're going to name it. Things like that. Because sometimes there'll be something called client naming, which that's fun. But yeah, so it's that's also kind of established, and sometimes that comes in the turnover packages as well, kind of these spec sheets, or if something has been updated or anything like that. Because again, at the end of the day, you want that communication to run as smoothly as possible.
Absolutely. Part of that communication is also letting the vendors know when you will be giving them work to work on and when you expect to have it back. So part of the relationship between the VFX producer on the filmmaker side and the VFX producer in the facility is an agreement on, the time scale that you're going to be working on this project, how frequently they're expecting to get shots from you to work on, and how frequently they're expecting to return them to you completed, as well as how often you'll be talking about them in between. So this is all stuff that the two VFX producers will discuss. And this is how you end up with these count sheets, because you can say, I'll give you 30 shots, but if you don't know what those 30 shots are going to be, you don't know what teams you don't know what you need to be working on. And obviously from the client point of view, you want to tell them as much as you can because you want to be getting the right stuff back from them. So it's all a communication thing. Although the vendors are providing, technically goods and services at the same time, they're providing this back to you. There does need to be some level of communication of, give and take of, hey, we need this information from you in order for us to provide the best thing back to you.
Yes.
So that's a huge communication thing. So you want to have somebody as a VFX producer who is really excellent with that communication and knows how to, have those vague financial conversations where you're not really giving up everything and you're not really taking everything. The ones.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Yeah. And like I say, it all goes with the turnover as well as the delivery back to the clients. Sometimes the material that's delivered back will be going straight to them. And sometimes it will go to that digital intermediary or the DI. So they're often the people who are dealing with the grade. They are dealing with, actually putting together that whole thing so that it can be sent to cinemas.
Yeah, the final kind of print.
Exactly. So they're the people who actually produce that final product. Obviously, your editors are there in the beginning telling you what stuff you want in what order and how long and, all that stuff. But it's the DIs who are actually, like you say, printing it and putting it together, and that's what goes out at the end.
Yes.
So again, that's another type of vendor that the VFX producers need to be working with, that they need to be budgeting for, because, you don't want to send things to them too many times because those processing costs, you don't want to be spending more money than you need to be.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of these things have to be taken into account, even in my position, if say something goes wrong and I'm trying to troubleshoot. I always check in with kind of the various producers and things, because it's easy for me to go, oh, well, we just need to get the scan resupplied. I always have to double check. I'm this could be a budgetary cost. There's a lot of kind of troubleshooting. So even my position has to be kind of aware of that kind of stuff, because you can't just go, oh yeah, we'll just do this kind of thing. Yeah,
absolutely. So the other thing, the big way that vendors and the filmmakers themselves will interact is through VFX reviews. As much as the vendors would like it to be the case that they just get given the work and then they deliver it back, a couple of months later, done. They do actually need to be going to those clients and saying, hey, is this what you want? Because you need to be making sure that the what you're producing is, what that vision was that no one can see. So you might be doing animation reviews if you've got, big scenes with, CG characters. You might be doing reviews of whole sequences together. You might be doing reviews of individual shots that are very specific and precise. Maybe you've got a long shot that's very complex. You've got a lot of things going on in there and you just want to devote a whole review to this 1 3-minute shot, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different ways that this can happen. And often in those reviews, you will have a coordinator from the filmmakers or the clients, as well as coordinators from the facility. And they will both be taking notes because they both have different things they need to be watching out for. Obviously, the facility coordinators need to be working out, what do we need to do next? You know, what do I need to tell the artists that they need to change? What do I need to tell them is approved? What do I need to, to do to move this along? Whereas the client side coordinators are going, is this coming in on time? Like, does it look like we're still on schedule? Like, what are we missing here? Like, they might also be both taking down information from... They might both be taking information down from what supervisors or directors are saying so that they can cross-check with each other. Hey, did I mishear that? Or did he say he wanted more or less blue? Let's see what the other one said. Oh, they said less blue as well. Great, we're right. Perfect. So there's a lot of cooperation. Often the notes that one will take will be sent to the other and vice versa, so they have all that information between the two. But yeah, we've got whole swathes of people who don't necessarily work for the same company, all in the same room, looking at the same thing with very different things they're trying to get out of it. You might have a producer in there going, keeping an eye on that supervisor who might be like, hey, instead of a waterfall of fire, how about we have an ocean of fire? And they're the one who has to go, okay, reel it back. They may not be doing that, say, in front of the vendors because, there's, political things. You don't want to undermine each other.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you always need that person in the room to be like, okay, what's actually happening here?
Yeah, which this is all fascinating for me because as we've kind of established, I think in episode 1 and episode 4 as a VFX editor, I'm in that same room, but I'm in the back and I'm just making sure the machines are running and that the next shot is ready. Because we do have to talk to each other because, again, this is something I would talk to either kind of the PA or something, or maybe even the coordinator sometimes is like, okay, what are we showing? What order are we showing? That kind of thing. And sometimes even I listen out for notes as well. I don't usually I'm not taking them down. Like I will remember many of the time, even seeing Helen in the room in front of me, just typing like crazy. And I always did wonder, I was like, okay, I know what you do and you do, but why is this person in the room? Why is this person in the room? Not that I cared, but it was, that's actually quite fascinating to hear. Yeah, exactly. Especially
people?
In the client reviews, you're just like, wait, who are all these people? But it's quite fascinating.
And sometimes it may even be reviewing things without being with the vendors. So the facility can package up a whole bunch of shots or, material that they want to get reviewed, and they will send it over to the clients who can then open it up at their leisure, especially if you've got people in different time zones. You might have, say, at the end of the day in UK, they're packaging things up and they're sending it over to the US, and you've got somebody over in LA who at the end of their day, way past when the UK office have gone home, they could start going, okay, let's review this. We'll take some notes. We'll, now we have time in our day. Because this isn't necessarily happening long after the shoot is done. Like this, all this work could also be happening simultaneously as when the shoot is happening. Because when we get these big shows that require these crazy fast turnarounds, the sooner you get a VFX vendor involved, the sooner you can get your stuff back from them. And also the sooner that you can go, hey, this is going in the wrong direction. We need to get people back to do reshoots. Perfect, they're already still on set because we haven't finished filming yet. So you can make those changes. Yeah.
Because sometimes I think this gets kind of in some of our fandoms when people hear about reshoots and things, they think, oh, the film is, bombing or there's problems or things. Sometimes, no, it's just something didn't work or it doesn't match up. It's not always disaster.
It's not always the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sometimes it is the visual effects that need to have the reshoots, or maybe the chemistry wasn't right or something like that. But
yeah, exactly. Or you might have gone, oh God, we needed to put a green screen behind these people. It's going to be really expensive if we just have them out on this set. We've still got the actors, like we've got them paid for another week because we're doing these other scenes. The set is still up, so we can just, let's do these reshoots. Yeah. So it's very easy to make those changes. And this is, again, why we need to have those scene and shot numbers and names like broken down is because if you need to replace, scene 3, shot 25, you need to know which one that is and which plate you're taking out and which one you need to work out. Have they already started working on it? Do we need to pay them for that work they've already done because we've decided to change things?
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of back and forth, and this is why we need these really, really complex databases. This is why we need people to be working on these things, because as much as, a computer database is great and all, you need people to interpret it.
Yes,
and to
exactly.
go, okay, we need this bit, we need to swap it with this bit. I get it.
Yeah, and it's when in times like this, when things like this happen, or in general, that where editorial and production on the vendor side very much, and also the client side very much, have to be in chats with each other, because it's like, sometimes I can flag seeing an edit and go, oh, this is a completely different take. And then I will immediately let production know, go, hey, they've changed this take, because then we have to request, we need a new scan. This changes this. I mean, sometimes that can change, go right back to like, oh, the match move, everything, and vice versa. They could tell us, oh, yes, that shot has been omitted. So I can update my edit, because those are going to be needed to be updated as fast as possible. So when we have these VFX reviews, they are seeing the most up-to-date thing. There's nothing more embarrassing than going in a VFX review and they go, oh, this is an out-of-date cut. Sometimes the turnover and the turnaround can be so quickly you can't even update it fast enough, but you try to strive to have that most updated versions, because it's going at a breakneck speed.
Yeah.
Well, that pretty much wraps up part 2 of our Business of VFX. Thanks for checking this out. Helen, where can they find us?
You can find us we are at Pending Final on Twitter. We are Pending Final on Facebook. At Pending Final Podcast on Instagram. You can email us if you send an email to pendingfinal@gmail.com. And Shannon, YouTube?
Yes, you can find us also on YouTube. We're currently looking to get about 100 subscribers, so then we can get a custom URL. But as always, we will always post kind of a link to the YouTube video in our Twitter and Instagram accounts.
Yeah, and alternating weeks, we're also doing some little Making of Monday things. So we've been doing, playlists on YouTube. We've been doing some little things on Twitter, so just check us out and let us know, like, subscribe, favorite, do all those lovely things.
Yes, look out for the hashtag Making of Monday.
Yeah.
And we always are trying to strive to pass things on. I think recently we did kind of our favorite breakdown reels that kind of got us interested in the world of visual effects and things like that. So we're always looking for fun things. And sometimes also we'll have fun little kind of hints on what the next week's episode will bring and see if you can kind of figure it out. So thanks for checking this out, and we will see you guys next time.
Approved. Final.